Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. With me today, I have the pleasure of discussing with Dr. Silviu Andrei from the Romanian Socialist Party. He is the head of the Bucharest chapter of the Romanian Socialist Party, a multipolar political party in Romania. And I invited him today to discuss about Europe's collaboration with China and the perspectives that our continent has regarding this collaboration. So, in order to start, let me give the floor to Silviu. And my first question for you would be: what is the relationship that your party has with China, and what is the collaboration that you envisage with the People's Republic?
Hello, Adrian. Thanks for having me in your show. It's a very informative show. Here in Romania, we have very few sources of information outside the Brussels, Washington, Tel Aviv point of view. I know you're living in exile, but we're watching you here in Romania. All of the Socialist Party members are watching your show.
Thank you very
About
much.
cooperation with China, our party, which is very small at the moment, because this is the way it works in capitalism, the the productive um, the productive forces are owned by a class, the foreign agents class, and the superstructure is dictated by them. So yeah, our party doesn't get much coverage in mainstream media, but our party is starting to build up, and seeing that we don't have any chance to beat these parties in the internal affairs arena, we're focusing on developing relations with the multipolar world, which we think about it in terms of as countries outside the empire. We have good relations with some countries and parties from inside the NATO space, which are fighting the same fight we do. Let's say
You
Greece.
are members of the Party of the European Left, if I am
Yes, we're
correct,
members
right?
of the European left in the European Parliament, but European left is very diluted in what it can do, uh, because a lot of parties are censored for some positions, let's say about Russia, Israel, or things like this. They can't articulate, uh, let's say, the correct and detailed opinions about the events going on. So European left is very constrained on what it can do in the European Parliament. It's not. Its role is merely symbolic there, because it can take positions, because the European Commission will deem it as a foreign agent and ban it altogether. So yes, it's not. You see that even the sovereigntist parties, which are not so radical, get persecuted for being foreign agents in the European Union. So what chance does the communist parties have? They're very much repressed in the European space. But for us, the multipolar world means building connections with countries from the emerging economies, from the global south, from outside the empire. Not necessarily socialist countries or countries with socialist aesthetic or superstructure, but countries that are not dependent on the US led world, which have alternative economic institutions and are not dependent on the empire's superstructure. Where
And sorry to interrupt you.
sorry.
You are not members of the International Socialist. Sorry, of the Socialist International, right? The Socialist International is more of a grouping of social democratic parties, if I
Yes,
understand correctly.
exactly. Where Thanks for asking me. Just recently, our party got invited into Sovintern, a new international that launched at Moscow a few weeks ago, at the beginning of May, with anti-imperialist parties, not necessarily communist or in Soviet in style and rhetoric, but anti-imperialist struggle, which in the global south takes a nationalist approach because they are colonies, and nationalism is very progressive in colonies. It emancipates colonial people, it gives them independence, self-determination. It's not the same as the nationalism of the empire, of the United States or of Germany.
Sure.
And we are part of Sovintern, along with many great parties like the Great Britain Workers' Party of George Galloway.
George Galloway.
Yes, who
lives in China, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, he's living in Russia.
In Russia?
Yes, he was arrested on the airport in the United Kingdom for supporting terrorism or something. He said something about Palestine, and he got detained. The American Communist Party, Jackson Hinkle, Haz al-Din, which are currently investigated by the FBI. They received a letter of information through Google on which they are prosecuted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Just like that, for talking about the Epstein files and Israel and stuff like this. It's not a specific accusation they are bringing, just challenging the rules-based order, as we like to say. Yes, yeah. We are part of Sovintern, and our relationships with these emerging powers are mostly built through visits in the bilateral visits at events like the Victory Day or the victory in the Great Anti-Fascist War for China. We also take part in events at their embassies when they have events for each country, let's say Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Iran, Russia, China. And yes, we talk to these countries constantly. We ask them what's going on internally because that's how we take our information. We don't read Reuters or New York Times. Yes, or stuff like this. We talk to the people there that are telling us, let's say, yes, the economy is so, the sanctions are doing this. They're not telling us everything is great or there's nothing going on. It's just the objective side of things told by people living there. We also talk to parties which are not a ruling party. Let's say in Russia, we don't talk to Russia United or someone from the government. We talk to the Communist Party of the Russian Federation and to the Just Russia Party, which are not in government. There's opposition to Putin, actually, to anyone calling us Putin agents or something like this. But the picture there is not what our scholarship receivers are painting in media.
So yes, they are in opposition, but they make some sort of national opposition. They do not make this liberal internationalist opposition to Russia, to Russia's government.
And we're constantly, there's always an event, conference with these countries from the multipolar world. Also with Malaysia, Indonesia, countries in South America, which maybe are not socialist regimes like Colombia or I know Colombia has Gustavo Petro, which is very progressive, but they're not a communist country. It's the first leftist president in 40 years they have or something. There are also but there are also some socialist parties we reject, like the so-called communist opposition in Iran, which is not a
the Mujahedeens in Albania.
Yes, there's
CIA camp in Albania.
Of course, yes.
So Mujahedeens.
Also pro-Java stuff that we also reject that. So yes, as I told you previously, the communist point of view is very certain. It's the one dictated by China. China is the leader of the multipolar movement of the emerging powers, which are not imperialist powers, but movements for self-determination of previously dependent countries, former colonies, former countries subjected to aggression, which are starting mostly also in Africa. A lot of progressive movements recently, because as we know, after the Soviet Union broke down in multiple countries, all the socialist governments in Africa collapsed, and
Yeah,
that's why
because
we
they could
have.
no longer receive aid from the Soviet
Yes,
Union.
we also since then there's always been multiple fronts of civil war in Africa. A lot of those countries that started to build up infrastructure, institutions, they started to develop their economy, to industrialize, to start having services, not only resource selling, have been crushed by civil wars supported by the Western countries. Because
Yeah,
let's not lie to ourselves, all those fronts, all those movements, be them a self-determination movement or Al Qaeda, ISIS insurgency, or something to break down bigger countries into smaller, easier to control states. All of those are supported by Western money and weapons. They all have Western weapons, Western tactics, Western drones. So yes, we also talk to these countries in Africa. It's very important to support their fight, because they're trying to not be colonies and to develop their countries without selling resources, just selling resources and labor.
sure. They want to move up the value chain and to internalize
Yes,
as much of the profits as possible.
it's their right, and China is helping them stabilize. If you look at their economies, at the countries that are more aligned with China, you see that they're starting to develop national economies, not just extraction and selling resources to Western companies. So yes, by replacing the material base in Africa, China is shaping the future there. It's the most important continent for the future of the world economy. And if they, when I'm certain they will succeed, but when they will succeed in becoming independent countries with strong states that are able to ensure their own security, it will be a huge victory for a free world, because the West will no longer have the chance to exploit them, and will no longer have the chance to sell weapons, because the military-industrial complex is very important for the Western countries. They need constant war to sell a lot of weapons, and by having war everywhere, multiple civil war fronts that take years and years, it's a very good way to sell the weapons. Let's not kid ourselves. All these aids for Ukraine, for Israel, they have so big sums of money, tens of billions of dollars, because a lot of these weapons get funneled to civil war fronts in Sahel, in Central African Republic, in Myanmar,
In Mexico, with the cartels, they
yes, in
also found
Mexico, where the cartels are always far right, Western-backed militias with
which oppose
Nazi.
trade unions, oppose
Yes,
indigenous movements. So yeah,
they always get strong when there's a leftist government in charge, and the argument will be that yes, the socialists promote crime. No, it's because that's when the United
no,
States.
somebody else promotes crime inside socialist countries in order
Yes, of course,
overturn the
there's no
government.
cartels. There's no cartels in Argentina because Milei is following the orders. And there's no
Yeah,
need
probably as soon
to.
as Argentina would have at least a Peronist government, if not a fully socialist government, then all of a sudden Argentina would be part of the criminal network importing drugs in the United States. It would be helping terrorism in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. Actually, the Kirchner couple, Fernando and Cristina, were also subjected to these lawfare operations that also Lula da Silva in Brazil was subjected to, also by this this establishment by the United States inside their countries using the criminal justice system, which is also something that happened in Romania. So maybe our foreign audience doesn't know this, but the Social Democrats in Romania, who used to be in power for the majority of the time ever since the events in 1989, so the fall of communism, they were rather centrist, and they had quite a strong collaboration with China. But their leaders ended up in jail successively. So Adrian Năstase, the prime minister, ended up in jail, and one of the accusations against him was the fact that he received some sanitary materials from China, like to build a bathroom or something like this, and he served time for this. Victor Ponta, his successor, had several criminal investigations opened against him, and he had to quit politics for about 10 years or so. And Viorica Dăncilă, the prime minister that was in 2018-2019 and is now the head of the chamber, I think the House of Friendship, Romania, China, something like this. She was also ousted from power quite brutally by this network of American-oriented agents. And even though the Social Democrats used to have some sort of a sovereigntist orientation, and they won the elections basically almost every time, there are these forces through the Romanian deep state and through the prosecutor general and the sort of anti-corruption that made sure that the leaders that were somehow sovereigntist could not really have a chance to effectively govern, and who eventually sold out basically their class interests and became Brussels loyalists, so to say, as they are now. And this is why a party like yours, which is to the left of the Social Democrats, is the multipolar alternative. Something of the orientation of Fico, for example, in Slovakia. But Fico, even though he was a member of the European Socialists, he was ousted as soon as he took a more sovereigntist position, and now he's considered far right, even though he's a social democrat. So probably, if you want to continue on this political path, you should also expect such things, either to be subjected to lawfare operations or to be labeled as far right. Because if you do not, if you're not a stooge of the empire, then you're a domestic force. You're a force of the domestic national internal interest, and that makes you nationalistic and therefore far right, according to the scholarship recipients of the empire.
Yes, also some of our members actually got persecuted at their work for appearing, doing political activism, even not even radical activism. They didn't have a militia or something. They just posted pro-Palestine messages, pro-China messages, and we got labeled as extremists and called out at work and told that we need to stop because it's dangerous. We didn't get threatened, let's say, but we were told it's dangerous to pursue this path, and we don't even have 1% in the last election. We're not a big party that's actually challenging power in Romania. We're a very small party. A lot of people, when it comes to voting, they try to vote in a useful way for the big party that seems to represent their interest a little bit. Let's say the Social Democrats, the sovereigntist parties, or Sense for children. We were told it's dangerous to pursue this path, to stop political activism, and to stop questioning why things are happening the way they are. Because in Romania, It's not merely a right-wing liberal comprador regime. It's a very, very messed up. All this nonsense is happening. All these things that seemed even in the mid 2000s, when we had Traian Băsescu, they seem absurd even for that era when Traian Băsescu was a puppet of the United States regime. But even he is a lot more moderate and sovereigntist than what we have today.
Yeah. He became the voice of reason. So regarding the annulment of the elections and regarding Călin Georgescu, he does not believe that Călin Georgescu is an agent of Russia, and he does not believe that the elections were annulled because of foreign influence. So he's way more moderate. He's persecutably moderate. This is how moderate he has become. Even though he was the ideologue of the doctrine of, well, he actually put it out in these words: "Let's suck up to the biggest firefly, which is the United States." So instead of sucking up to the little fireflies, the European countries, let's suck up to the big firefly. And this is his political doctrine, and he actually managed to institutionalize it in the Romanian state. We have been under the big firefly ever since. So this is why also during the last presidential elections, it was not just that the elections were annulled after Călin Georgescu won the first round, and after the first round had been validated, and after voting had already started for the second round in the diaspora. But another candidate who also had a multipolar orientation, Diana Șoșoacă, was not allowed to run in the first place on the grounds that she's not geopolitically aligned in the correct way, and that she might question Romania's alliance system membership. So therefore, the Constitutional Court now says it in the open, it is part of their doctrine, that they will not allow a candidate to stand if that candidate wants to question Romania's position inside the empire. So even though Romanian people might want to vote for a change of direction, they're just unable to, because the candidates that might uphold such a change of direction are not deemed eligible to run, are being disqualified even from taking part in the elections.
Yes, ever since Traian Băsescu's reign, I think actually it started to happen a little bit under the Emil Constantinescu years, but it was we were still not in NATO, so they didn't have much leverage on us then. But after Traian Băsescu, during his time, we started conflating pro-democracy with pro-American.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's always a democratic vote.
Yeah. There are people who vote correctly, who vote for democracy, and there are the other ones who vote against democracy. They just go in large numbers and vote against democracy. They vote against the United States.
So let's say the party that can steal elections, or the regime that can steal elections, is never the opposition. It's always the party that organizes them.
Yeah.
So in Romania, we had elections organized by the pro-European coalition. We had a pro-European president, Klaus Iohannis, and two pro-European parties in government. So they organized elections, and there was no way the opposition, be it sovereigntist or communist or whatever, didn't have any leverage, any institution they were leading, to influence the vote in any way.
Especially Călin Georgescu running as an independent, so he didn't even have observers in the ballot stations because he didn't have a party behind him.
Yes, and there was this talk that there's a democratic vote, and the democratic vote has never been in Romania more than 50%. We've always had since Traian Băsescu, we've always had a dictatorship of the minority. Always some sort of parliamentary scheme to divide parties, to break them up, to have.
Whenever the democratic vote was less than 50%, meaning always, then pieces of other parties, of the non-democratic parties, had to be broken in order to govern together with the pro-democratic vote.
And
Yeah.
even when we have this problem again, the problem with liberal pseudo democracy is that there's always this technocratic myth. We have this problem now. What does it mean to be a technocrat? And there's
It needs
never
to be an expert that is registered and that is acknowledged as such by the network of experts. It's like peer review in academia. You have to be acknowledged by the experts in expertology who are run by these networks of experts, funded by USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy and all of these things.
To talk about China, we in Romania are fed this propaganda that China is a totalitarian state. It's a dictatorship. It's called the People's Republic of China. It's a popular democracy, which is the people in China have far more power to influence how the government does certain things or all the things. It's a popular democracy. The people can enter the party, rise up the ranks through their local.
And the party has like 100 million people or something like this. 100 million members.
It's a huge party, organized in all the rural areas. So it's not like in Romania where two big cities, Bucharest and Cluj-Napoca, dictate the
policies
politics
for the entire country.
Yes, in China or in popular democracies in history, the party has always had a strong presence in the rural area to give the poor people there a voice. In Romania, we see that, let's think about it, 50% of the people earn less than 4,000 rons or coin. And like 8% of the people are actually rich, earning over 9,000, 10,000 rons. So there's like 80% of the population that's not doing well, either being extremely poor, taking the minimum wage, taking no vacation because the owner of the enterprise doesn't give them. It's happening in Romania. People don't receive their holiday days, their paid vacation days. The boss takes the money for that. They don't receive that. They either accept it or not. If they don't accept it, they're fired. That's why we bring a lot of migrant workers, because they accept lower
minimum wage. And according to statistics, even before this influx of migrant workers, the minimum wage, the legal minimum wage in Romania was the median wage, not the average wage. Of course, the average wage is a bit higher, but the median wage. So if you rank up all the wages from the smallest to the biggest, the one on the middle position is still the minimum wage. So more than half of the wage earners in Romania earn the minimum wage.
Yes. Also, a lot of people working without legal files, because
working in the black or in the gray.
Because it's cheaper for the Romania has a very high GDP, and the Bucharest Ilfov region has a higher GDP than Hamburg or Paris. How does that happen? How are we so poor if we have such a great GDP?
Well, because people confuse production with wealth.
Yes, because
GDP is just a measure of how much is produced in a region, but that doesn't mean that that production is developing the region or that the profits stay there. Because Romania is a manufacturing and service outsourcing annex of the Western capital. Then, there is economic activity done at very basic levels of wage and of working conditions, and the profits are exported. They are repatriated to the headquarters.
A lot of money is transiting Romania, but it's not staying in Romania. So yes, we have 50% of the population earning minimum wage, and like 80% of the population being actually poor by European standards, not affording a vacation outside the country or even inside the country. And how come we always get to be governed by what the 5% rich people want? They want Băsescu, they want Nicușor, they want Union Save Romania. and they want a war with Russia. How come we always get governed by them? Because we're not a democracy. China is far, far, far more democratic than any country in the Western world, because it represents the majority of the people. Yes, even in China, there are some people which are not represented by the government. They have opposition, they have people that don't support the government, but it's a small percentage. Democracy should mean the will of the majority of the people. And we've never had that after 1990. We've never had that. I mean, even in Ceausescu's final years, he was not unpopular by what it means to be popular. He still had more than 50% support from the country. Okay, maybe it's not a place to talk about that, but after 1990, we always got governed by what 3-5% of the population wanted. And we're not
because
the ones...
that was the democratic vote. So
Yes,
we got governed democratically by well, the democratic vote, irrespective of how big it was. Maybe it was just 3%. Well, better than to be governed undemocratically by the majority, right?
So that's why we have a lot to learn from China. We have a lot to learn from representing the poor strata of the population. We need to talk to people who are being fired, who can't afford groceries, who can't afford rent. I know a lot of people that choose between medication and food, that choose between going to the doctor and rent, or that they take loans to afford basic things, clothes, or repairing something in the house. They take loans and pay like half their income for that loan after that. So we're not a democracy because we're not representing the majority of the people, the government. Unlike in China, which is representing the vast majority of the Chinese population, which is huge. It's like 1.4 billion people, and the party represents most of them. The few dissidents that the United States find to parade around as opposition, as democratic opposition, are like just 0.01% of the population that are against the government there. And that's why our relationship with China as a party is very good. We learn from them. Mainly, what we learn from them, what we've learned recently, is how to organize better in the country, in the rural regions, in the poorer regions. They teach us how to talk to the people that are very disenfranchised in the system, that don't vote. A lot of people in Romania don't vote, like 50%. 50%. Why do we have democracy if 50% of the people never vote? You know, if you remember, you're a bit older than me. The first elections held after the coup d'etat, it was like 90% the vote presence.
Yeah, the biggest turnout.
The biggest turnout. And after that, let's say apart from the media terrorism of the elections that happened last year, a year ago, it's always like 35-40%. From the big cities, and people called by the big parties to vote for the pro-European candidate in the rural regions. The poor people in Romania have no representation. They have us, the Socialist Party of Romania, but of course we don't have the budget to have such a media presence to be heard everywhere. And even if we are close to getting into government or getting to power, we would be arrested, not just cancelled.
Yeah, probably it would be like Călin Georgescu. He was okay
Far
as
worse.
long as he had 0.5% or something like this. But as soon as he won, then he became a criminal, an insurrectionist. He started having these corruption, well, not even corruption, these insurrection charges against him, being prosecuted for being an extremist and so on. So yeah.
So there's a lot of learn for Romanians from these countries outside the empire. We have to learn how to represent the people first. From the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, from Belarus, from People's Republic of China, from all these countries, Cuba, Venezuela, which are currently subjected to US state terrorism. from the Islamic Republic of Iran. People call that a dictatorship, but the Iranian system is very complex and it represents most of the people. The Iranian Revolution from 1979 was a wonderful thing. The Persian population, all the people there wanted to change the US back to regime, and the Islamic State represents their interest today. The Islamic law governing the economy is not a capitalist economy. Yes, it has capitalist relations in some enterprises, but they're not predatory because Islamic law, which is enforced by the Islamic Revolution Guards, doesn't let them do the things that our economy does.
Yeah, for example, Islamic banking does not charge interest.
Yes,
because usually is a sin.
You can't force workers to work without vacation. You can't withhold pay. Things like this that are happening in Romania all the time are not allowed in Iran. The reason for the Islamic Republic's economic problems is heavy sanctions regime by the United States, and being so close to Israel and having to prepare for war all the time. Because that's another thing how the Western world keeps the global South down. By enforcing war upon them, it forces them to redirect a lot of money towards defense. If they had, like, you know how much GDP Venezuela allocated for defense until this year, before Maduro was kidnapped? 0.5% or something like that. It wasn't even 1%, and they had threats from the United States being so close to them, and they didn't allocate not even 1%. Of course, they lost so heavily. They had firing weapons, but they don't have sophisticated air defense, radars, hypersonic missiles, swarms of drones. They don't have this stuff. They were prepared for guerrilla warfare or a ground invasion, but they aren't prepared to face F-35 jets or Black Hawk helicopters. They're not prepared for that because they invested in the population, in elevating the living standard. And
also the oil economy was under sanctions. They could not repair the oil wells, they got broken, and so on.
And that's how they keep the material state of the global South down. They force war upon them to make them redirect 5% of GDP towards war, or even more, like the Sahel states, which are in constant war with Al-Qaeda or Myanmar or the Central African Republic. They're always at an imposed war with United States or Western-backed terrorist groups, and that's why they can't invest properly in infrastructure how they would like to do. I think they would develop far better and would make leaps in improving the living standards if they had peace. That's why China is developing so well. It's just they developed security during Mao's and Zhou Enlai's eras, when they invested in the People's Liberation Army and they were secure from any aggression. And after that, they invested in their country. And that's why it's so far ahead of the Western world. That's why they produce everything cheaper, faster, and cleaner. That's why their workers all afford basic things, basic necessities without even a care.
Probably the reason why China managed to break out of this imperial deadlock with having to finance defense at such astronomical rates and so on is because Taiwan is a much smaller proxy or a much smaller security problem than, for example, in the case of India. They have Pakistan, they have this territorial dispute, they're both nuclearly armed, whereas the proxy that is being used against China is way too small. And it's also a Chinese proxy, so in the sense that they also consider themselves Chinese, they speak Mandarin and so on. So it's less of a security problem for China than for other countries that have similar proxies that they need to always fight or defend against.
China also had Japan being
Yeah, sure.
antagonistic
But then it was
near
destroyed by
them.
the United States, and after
It
it
was
entered the sphere of influence of the United States, it was not allowed to remilitarize. It is only now allowed and actually encouraged to remilitarize to fight China again. But China had a few decades of lack of threat from Japan
yes.
after the Second World War.
So that's our to answer your question from the start of the video about Chinese-European relations. They are growing in spite of the political efforts. I mean, all the Western leaders are very offensive, very threatening. They always talk about the danger of China, how they must fight China. Kaja Kallas talked about how can we fight China if we can defeat Russia. Like, who declared war on China? Who declared war on Russia?
The rules-based international order that she
Yes,
upholds.
and we are very rude in the European space. We're very we lack diplomacy because we put all these people that have very low IQs and very low preparation into these diplomatic positions. Presidents, foreign ministers, in the European Commission, we have all this.
Yeah, when the Americans chose the scholarship recipients in order to develop
They
them
pick
into
the
the
lowest.
statespeople for Europe, intelligence was not exactly the main criterion. It was more like obedience, probably
It was an
the main
exclusion
selection
criteria.
criterion.
And yes, we're very rude to China, but because we lack the education, the material base, the work ethic of China, we are forced uh, to allow economic relations with China, and that's how we import so many things from there. We could be doing better. We could be helped by them to develop energy projects, rail projects, and
We could have high-speed rail.
we could have smart factories. We could have all this clean and diverse energy that the European Commission is talking about, but we don't have nuclear. We look at what's happening in Romania with nuclear facilities.
Yeah, there was a Chinese project signed up by Victor Ponta, who used to be the prime minister in 2014, 2015.
But then
And then
some
some
club
fire,
burned.
yeah, some club fire all of a sudden, and he had to resign because corruption kills. And then the project was stopped subsequently by the scholarship recipients from the United States who came to power. And an American company was selected to build mini nuclear reactors, an experimental technology that went nowhere. The same people, the same scholarship recipients of the United States, who, when they had the transport portfolio, the Ministry of Transport, selected hydrogen trains. So instead of having some sort of technology to replace the train stock, some sort of viable technology that already exists, they chose something experimental, hydrogen trains, and there was no company to come to the tender to make a bid. So therefore, the money was lost. Yeah, it's this lack of pragmatism and this sucking up to the United States that, yeah, instead of us rebuilding the nuclear, developing the two nuclear reactors of Chernobyl that still need to be built with Chinese technology, we decided to just quit the whole project and to take this experimental. I think it's based on submarine reactors. The one that was that was supposed to replace a thermal power plant that we had to close down because of European Union regulations in Doicești. Yeah.
And what we need to learn from China, I think the most important thing that we have to build our future on is their education system and their work ethic. We had that in the socialist republic when school was very serious. People were finishing high school, not university, by having a rich knowledge of all the fields, basic but diverse knowledge. And that's how the Chinese people and most Asian or global South countries invest heavily in education and have very smart kids when they finish high school. Like, meanwhile, in the European space, we we constantly cut the budget. The professors become more and more disinterested, and children finish these levels of education by having very few knowledge fields they can talk about. I think recently kids don't even know which century Ceausescu lived in. I mean, it's gotten so bad. You can talk about anything with anyone besides festivals, drugs, rap music, and what's
Yes, Silvio,
happening.
but it's for the greater good. How else can you have 5% allocated to defense?
Yes.
5% out of not of the budget, out of the GDP. The budget collects only 35% of the GDP or something like this.
And our
Because we
GDP
have low
constantly
taxation.
shrinks since we
Sorry?
have the pro-European coalition. Our GDP constantly shrinks. So
Yeah. Romania is in
we'll
a
let
technical recession. I mean, yeah, technical. They like to call it technical in order to somehow allude to the fact that it might not be a real recession. It's just technical, but it's this
it's
is how you
following.
do recession. It's not like we have technical rain. It either rains or it doesn't rain. It's not like it rains, but only technically.
It's coming up tactical recession.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And we've lost the work ethic and education from the past. The generation that entered the 1990s was very educated. That thing kept going for let's say about another 10 years, but since the 2000s things degraded heavily. And when we learn about how people from China or Democratic People's Republic of Korea or Cuba, what they learn in school, the level of math, of chemistry, of physics they do there, we are amazed by. Yes, it's not new, it's not revolutionary. We also did that before 1990 or before the 2000s. But recently we have to learn that we are left behind in a civilizational sense. We're becoming more stupid, more ignorant. We can't read the text. We can't read the text, and
Yeah, it's the American model. Keep them stupid, keep them
so they
poor,
so they
but
can't
invest a lot
revolt.
of propaganda into them so that they don't realize they are poor. They're too stupid to realize that they should have the right to healthcare, or that they should have an educational system that allows them to think, not just to repeat lines from sitcoms and stuff like this.
People in Romania can't. We also you talk about we talked about my party. We can't attract so many people because our propaganda needs to be dumped down to the level of the liberal parties. They have all this talk about values, and people don't read. You remember, I think our grandparents, they were reading the newspaper, technical articles about the economy, about agriculture, about world affairs. Right now, it's just a few buzzwords about values, about the West, about
Vote
democracy, and that's how.
democratically, do not vote undemocratically.
So people don't even question. I mean, you look at in
Vote
Romania, we had
pro-European, do not vote pro-Asian or
they don't
pro-African.
even see the contradictions inside the press. If you read just let's say one news outlet, you read that okay, Mayor Nicușor Dan managed to pay out all the debt of the city. Okay, hurrah, bravo, congratulations, Mr. Nicușor. Then a few months later, we have mayoral elections again, and the
The same
pro-European
liberal press.
the pro-European guy wins, and he
Yeah.
tells that the city has more debt than it ever had. Just a few months apart, what the same newspaper tells that the debt has been paid, and a few months later that the debt is higher than it's ever been. So people
Yeah, it's a
don't even think that
it,
they're
sorry. Yeah.
the people don't even realize there are contradictions inside this thing. They read that Russia is about to invade us, but also that Russia is about to fall.
Yeah. This is where I was trying to get. So, not noticing contradiction is a key tenet of the social engineering process that is done in the West. So, how to dump down your population to the level where it can no longer see that A and non A are a contradiction and have some sort of logical error signal in their brain. This is kind of like the American model that was employed also in Europe with the advent of the consumerist society and of the entertainment industry and of the dumbing down through the school system. That you got a population that can no longer even distinguish between A and non-A, and to see that those two are incompatible. It's either this or the opposite. The corona vaccine is working, but you have to steer away from the unvaccinated people because they give you the disease if you are vaccinated. Well, it either works and then you're immune and then you don't get sick. If you get in contact with the virus, not with the unvaccinated person, with the virus itself, or it doesn't work, and then you have to steer away from any kind of infection source. But the key tenet of the social engineering that was done to the European population, to the vassals of the United States on the European continent, was the dumbing down to the level that people can no longer recognize contradiction. This is the main takeaway, I think.
And after we accept the first step in mending our relationship with the world is accepting that we're not better, we're not great, accepting that we have a problem. So we have this problem, this educational problem. Okay, we need to learn to stop being so arrogant and learn from other countries, from countries in the global south, from countries in Asia, in South America. We need to learn from them how to educate our children, how to build the state, because the state is not meant to be just a few corporation lobbyists parading around as technocratic ministers.
Yeah, because we were talking about the technocratic class. Now they are talking about a prime minister in Romania because the previous one fell, and they're trying to pick a technocratic candidate. And all the technocratic candidates are lobbyists for foreign corporations. This is what being a technocrat means.
And we're calling ourselves a democracy, but we will put a prime minister from a corporation because we can't put the one that won the most votes, because that would be undemocratic.
No, that would be undemocratic. Like the party that won the most votes and the second biggest party, the party that came in second, are two non-democratic parties. So the only solution possible is to have a technocratic government to preserve democracy and to be run by the 5% USR party, the pro-European elites.
And after we do that, after we accept we have a problem, we need to learn from China. We need to send people there or have them send people here to teach us to build our countries back. We need to, I'm not saying we need to import everything we do. We should be doing stuff locally in our countries. But we forgot how, because of the education system, because we have economies where everyone is ONGist or influencer.
Everybody is an expert or an NGO worker. So
everyone is an expert in hyperwelfare. And after we do that, I think we'll see our social base, our social development grow stronger. But we need to learn from these people that we demonize now. But of course, the answer right now is that we need to destroy these civilizations to preserve the West. We need to destroy Russia and China and Iran and everyone who doesn't obey, because they're a threat to us. I think recently Ursula von der Leyen called Turkey a threat. I think they're preparing.
Exactly. Everybody who's not towing the line is a civilizational threat to the West. But this is the problem. We are inside this paradox. I agree that our level of development in the West and our level of consciousness in the West has basically plummeted. But the problem is with cognitive decline, and this is what the presidencies of Biden and now of Trump also show. With cognitive decline, your awareness also decreases. So Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas do not know that they are mentally impaired. They think of themselves as intellectual elites, and they have surrounded themselves with sycophants. There's nobody to tell them that they are really very, very dumb, and therefore they have no way of finding out. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. If our leaders, if our European leaders are abysmally dumb, then how can they accept tutelage? How can they accept, as you said, bringing specialists from civilizations to teach them how to do diplomacy, to teach them how to build a state, how to build institutions, and all these things?
I don't know what the future reserves us. I think right now it has to get a lot worse before it gets better. We're not on the path towards peaceful cooperation of the East. We're not on the path towards cooperating with Eurasia and learning from them, because we're arrogant, and the Western answer to civilizations rising is to destroy them, like they did like they tried to do with the Soviet Union. It's the same they're trying to do with China. I'm not placing my hopes on the Trump Xi summit in Beijing, because these things also happened between Germany and the USSR before the war. They're just making a few concessions here and there to avoid war, to avoid total war. I don't know if it will come to war. It will also come to the internal collapse of the West. But the strategy of tension and of continuous war propaganda will keep going for a few years in the West. We will keep having good relations economically with China because we have no alternative.
Yeah, China is basically the indispensable nation in the international system because everybody has it as its main trading partner. They cannot really escape the manufacturing center of the world.
Even reactionary regimes like Argentina relies on trading with China. I mean, there's not.
Yeah, because the US doesn't manufacture much. So what can you get from there? You only get protection.
Protection from
the main export from themselves. Yeah. The main export that the United States has is protection. From whom? Well, just like Al Capone offered protection in Chicago. If you don't want your store to catch fire, better buy protection from Al Capone. This is kind of like the US sales pitch.
But I think that slowly but surely China is replacing the economic base in all the countries. I mean, it's transforming the economy and the social relations between working class and the capitalist class. It's revolutionizing the economy in a historical way. It's by imposing its model of production, by imposing its model of development. China is changing the material base of all the countries, even the reactionary ones. At some point, the system will, the current system that is imposing the superstructure will fail, will stop being able to reproduce itself. Okay, it will be a big economic crisis. A lot of people will be poor, a lot of people will die. That's why they're investing in surveillance tech, in Palantir, in drones, in censorship.
To prevent uprisings.
To prevent, if they were sure of their economic development, if they were sure of their soft power, if they were certain that their economies will relaunch and become better again, they wouldn't need Palantir and censorship and this. Because if you are saying that you're a communist or pro-Russia or pro-Palestine in the 2000s, there wasn't much that could happen to you. They wouldn't arrest you. They wouldn't do anything to you.
Yeah, now this is the problem. We are also at the end of the line economically, so the economic system is failed. They're trying to prevent any kind of descent, irrespective of the direction. Also, with the vaccine crusade in the 2009 bird flu pandemic or swine flu pandemic, I don't remember what it was, AH1N1 in 2009. There was also vaccine, but it was not mandated. So, and they also took it off the market quite fast because pharmacovigilance showed that it had a high rate of narcolepsy, even though it was an inactivated virus vaccine. So there was no like totalitarian build-up regarding this one issue. But right now, I think that there could be a totalitarian build-up regarding any issue. There was with the vaccines. If you support Palestine, if you are pro-China, if you're pro-Russia, if you're pro-Iran, basically, if you are pro anything that the government doesn't dictate, then you are a threat to the public order, and then you become sanctioned, and so on and so forth. Or yeah, the Israeli approach to civilizations, because you were saying that right now, because we are no longer able to catch up and we are no longer able to compete, we just want to kill the other civilizations. This is basically I think the Israeli approach to competing, right? They even have this motto. The Mossad has the motto: "Rise and kill first." So yeah.
Yes, that's where we're going. I mean, you asked me about our party. My party is somewhat radical in solutions. It's asking for radical changes in the society. But you see that even the sovereigntist opposition, which is not so radical, got heavily persecuted. I mean, in the 20s, in the 1920s and 30s, in the previous pre-war period, they only persecuted. At first, they only persecuted communist parties, which were militarily organized, and they threatened to organize a revolution. So okay, they banned these parties in Italy, in Germany, in Europe, in Romania,
Romania as well in 1924, I think.
After
The
taking
failed
Basarabia.
uprising, yeah.
And after so in the last pre-war period, they only banned communist parties, but now they started banning soft opposition. Let's say, let's be serious. Kalin Georgescu wasn't a radical opposition. He just had a nuanced discourse on aid to Ukraine. He didn't even threaten to leave any structure or to oppose Israel or to oppose the United States. He was pro-United States in discourse. But because the European Commission and the United States weren't so certain that he would continue providing so much aid to Ukraine, they arrested him. In Germany, in all the European countries, they're not even persecuting communist opposition. They're persecuting any opposition, any soft opposition, any.
Yeah, in Germany they're trying to ban AfD, so it's a rather mainstream party, but they need a boogeyman.
It's not even communist. It's not even left wing. It's a very bourgeoisie party.
It's a conservative party, pro-Israel to a large extent.
Because they're so scared that their model of development is at the end of the line, and they have no plan, no alternative to exit this strategy. So let's think about it. What does the European Union? How do we see the next 20 years? Let's say the European Union keeps existing in 20 years. Will we keep rearming forever? No, at some point, there will have to be a choice between launching total war or making peace and redirecting these funds. Let's say we cut military budgets to 1% and increase health and education budgets. Do you see the European Union doing that?
The problem is the more we militarize, the more appealing the option of total war becomes. Because if we are weak militarily, then of course the option of total war against Eurasia is certain suicide. It is undoubtedly self-destruction. But the more we militarize, we also develop this hope that maybe we will be able to conquer Eurasia, and we may be able to become this next iteration of the Reich that will be able to conquer what the previous iteration was not able to.
Yes,
so this is why I think it's a dangerous road, the road to militarization. It's a one-way street. It's not like at some point when you militarize enough, then you think, okay, let's just use all these weapons to just sit in the stockpiles and become obsolete. No, you also get the incentive to use them because that's why you produce them. You invested in it, and you have to take your investment back, right? You have to get a return on it.
Yes, that's why I'm worried about our future relation with China and with Eurasia in general, because we can't seem to have to allow anyone's discourse to win. To let's say we had actual liberal democracy, and there are in power some pro-war parties, but then they lost. They were replaced by other anti-war parties, and it would be balanced over the years. There would be allowed to have some balance in the political development of the country. But as we can see, they're not banning communist parties; they're banning any opposition.
Yeah, basically, if you have an anti-war stance, uh, you're just not tolerated. Um, it's like intruder alert. We have an anti-war party in the system. Wow, lock them up, arrest them quickly, and yeah, ban them from the internet and so on.
I've heard some of the scholarship recipients in Romania saying that the quest for peace or pacifism is Soviet propaganda, is communist
Yeah, of
propaganda.
course, it's a Putin ruse. We all know that. It's just
Even I don't know, young activists that think about Palestine and don't even think about Russia, they call for peace, and they are called Soviet propagandists, and that's how Goebbels talked. They were against pacifism. They saw
yeah, because
pacifism as
you
anti-state.
yeah you basically label pacifists as being appeasers, and even worse, as being traitors, because you're a traitor to the war. What is peace if not treason to the war cause? So then, yeah, of course, yeah.
So yes, the future is not looking very bright right now. But I hope the internal contradictions in the Western world will catch up before we launch total war. And besides our party, which is still growing, still building, and we're learning a lot from the global south, we also have this some former social democratic politicians you mentioned earlier that are working to
To
build
better
a
the relations with
relationship.
China.
Yeah, they're in a relationship with China, and we are praying that it doesn't come to war and to destruction, and that the regime change will be peaceful and as civilized as it can be. But right now, I worry that this class of Euro-Atlanticist elites will cede power democratically. They will cling to power with any desperate gesture they can take. So
Yeah,
that's
I also hope good times are ahead, and I hope that we will not just exhaust our civilization in this manner of committing military suicide. I hope that what you said, some sort of internal contradictions will take hold, and the system will unravel before it manages to reach suicidal level. But I'd like to thank you very much for our dialogue, and I hope that your party has a good standing in the next elections, should these elections take place.
thank
And
you.
let's talk soon. Thanks a lot for being on my channel, and greetings to all our listeners.
Thank you too very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.